Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge and I'm your host. I'm the author of 12 books, a CEO of 13 years, a founder of a startup set on data privacy, most importantly an elite performance coach of over 19 years, having worked with athletes throughout Europe, the United States to Australia. Most excitingly, I am the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance, specifically behind how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. My work includes everything from mitigating injuries to conditioning behaviors that set a player up long term for the long game towards a top 10 tennis ranking. I'm behind theories from the optimal performance theory, optimal behavior for optimal performance, the barrier breaker, the rule of transference to the golden rule. As has become custom, each episode we dive into the latest rankings and results on the WTA and ATP tours and deliver new data implications as shared in my latest release, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking, with over 80 episodes to date. Today's insights and key topic plays its own role, like so many other episodes, in developing the player, parent to coach for that road ahead towards a top 10 tennis ranking. So, as always, buckle in and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today. As always, if you've been with us for some time now, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Though, for those of you who are new to Beyond Top 10 Tennis, thank you so much. Though, as always, I'd really encourage you to track back to, let's say, episodes, say 50 to 60, and so you can really, I think, see where we've come from and how far we've come so far, I guess, this season. Given the change of pace, where we've really been narrowing in on the key, I think, insights and the specific correlations with the players' performance and their results, which really, I think, underscores such a substantial body of work over the last 11, 12 plus years now, which is essentially centered on collating data from the best players in the world and their coaches as well over varying periods of time, that has really, I think, informed how far we've come and where we are today with 12 books. And I promise it will grow, though that said, I am trying to focus on sharing, I think, these key implications right here on Beyond Top 10 Tennis, rather than penning my next book. And I can promise you it's underway. I'm not sure how to break that habit, in all fairness, having done that for the best part of the last 8-9 years. Continuously, I think, sharing, because for me personally it's that much more rewarding, allowing players, coaches, parents, irrespective where you're based in the world, to give you the tools to develop that top 10 tennis ranking. Because as I've shared in previous episodes and throughout my work, this is new. It's new data, new scientific implications, and something that is at the forefront of our game that has never been seen, achieved, or heard of before. And I guess that is why AM8 International was built, to be able to allow you, irrespective, I think, how you participate or partake in tennis, to really showcase whether you are at your local club, academy, you're currently ranked top 500 in the world, or maybe you're top 50 in the world, looking at what you really need to do to progress towards the top 20 and top top 10 that we have the data. And I think it's not just the data. Data is a very generalized term, but it's really the steps required to get there. And I've touched on this in many of our previous episodes, that it's been broken down into 8 keys, so 8 subsets, 8 divisions. I prefer keys because we look at different language implications, and that's something a little bit more complex that I won't dive into right here and now, though it is elaborated on in my latest release on how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. And given that it was released at the end of last year, it has really freed up that space to share more about not just the data, but the newness, if you like, of it and its direct implications that you can cement and integrate into your game now, and how it shared the 8th key. And one of my previous texts before that was the 7 keys, and now with all 8 with the data, it's essentially breaking it down and sharing with you what you really need. And I think most excitingly, you may be listening and inside the top 10 on the WTA or ATP tour and wondering what you're missing to win that maiden Grand Slam. And that's where it gets really exciting, because the data, and again very generalized here, doesn't just say, hey, this is what you need to do to develop and ascend towards a top 10 tennis ranking. It's so much more, from winning that maiden Grand Slam to more than one Grand Slam, which we term as replicated success. But I think we can all acknowledge one comes before the other. Granted that we do have anomalies, which is very important to share, where there are players that are not ranked or their ranking does not correlate with their current performance or their results. And we do have sporadically players that do win that maiden slam, but there are key patterns in our data that pinpoint that this is a probability, though it's not going to be as clear cut as others. Now that can get a little bit confusing, so when there is an anomaly, I try not to give, I think, that too much attention, because if we're looking at, say, 10,000, 100,000 players, that anomaly is less than 1% of the time as a benchmark. So for the majority looking at progressing towards that top 10 tennis ranking, the rule still applies. For the anomalies, however, which is again really important to share, again the rules still apply. It's just a kickstart. And a really good example of that could be Raducanu, whereas she was not, her ranking did not align at the time when she won her maiden slam. However, it was not that surprising. Granted, she had a very successful result at Wimbledon prior to the US Open. However, her ranking then regressed shortly after, and that's what players are more susceptible for that to happen. But there are key patterns that we can look at to get a player that has reached that level of success back towards the top 10 much sooner, in contrast to a player who has not followed a similar trajectory. It can be a lot to take on, and I guess that's where Beyond Top 10 Tennis comes into play. But then at the same time, Swiatek and Alcaraz are really good examples. Sinner as well, but I'm going to focus here on Swiatek and Alcaraz because their rankings weren't necessarily correlating with their ascension, not just towards the top 10 at a given time, but their Grand Slam metric. And the biggest standout here is Swiatek, because she was ranked roughly around 80 in the world before winning her maiden Grand Slam. And our data pinpointed that she was primed to win that slam within that season because of her key metrics. Alcaraz, on the other hand, he had again been progressing and he was primed to win that slam, though he was already ranked inside the top 10 at that time of winning. I don't have the data in front of me, but I believe that is the case. Sinner obviously had ascended inside the top 10 as well prior to that. But there are these key implications for players and how to win that slam, especially if they're not ranked inside the top 10, as was Swiatek's case, because of these respective, I think, the keys and the subsets that are integrated into a player's game. Okay, that was a lot there, but I really do like to share, I think, some key implications with the data, our scientific underpinnings in some way, shape or form, I think, in a brief snippet at the beginning of each of our episodes. But as we've been tracking so far this season, which I cannot believe that we are already in April, which means we're essentially almost 4 months deep now, are really pinpointing primarily the top 100 rankings and looking at key progressions or regressions, some really big, let's say, blips or bumps along the way, and then looking at a player's performance, typically, especially through the What Is Your Game Missing series. For those of you who have read, there are 3 texts in there: What is your game missing, what is your game missing now, and what is your game missing to win, which pinpoints essentially the best players in the world at that given time. Let's say roughly, probably across both tours, 50 to 70 per text, and really shared with you these key implications and what a player needed to do to progress towards the top 10. And this is before the 8 keys came to life, but the majority of current players inside the top 10 are in those texts prior to their top 10 ranking, because we were tracking them at that time. However, given that my latest, let's say 2-3 publications really had to take a bit of a pivot away from the, let's say, those key data correlations to share more about how to understand, how to integrate into your game. This is actually the first time in the last, over that period of time, where I've been able to talk about the players now, in contrast to, say, 3 seasons ago. Sure, we've touched on, I think, their various peak performances, but over the last 2-3 seasons, we have a lot of newcomers, and that's something I have been focusing on and will focus on in future works. But I had to allow another 2-3 seasons to pass to be able to share those key metrics. And I say that because when a season is underway, I can share real time like I'm doing now, but the data is still being compiled until the season's ending. I'm hoping that makes sense for the majority of you out there. If not, please bear with me. That said, that's really, I think, the importance of each and every one of these episodes, the respective, I think, underlying topic there, which is really around what needs to be done for these players to progress further in the rankings. All right, as always, we're going to start on the WTA Tour, look at the rankings, look at the tournaments over the last week that has been, and then we'll cross over to the ATP Tour. All right, top 100 WTA Tour. Sitting at 100 is Irani. She's actually progressed 2 points. Now, we've got a couple of ranking movers this week because of the events that have been underway. Bondar's up 13 points, number 95 in the world. So she has cracked the top 100, 26-year-old from Hungary. And Raya is at 94, 18 places inside the top 100, 21-year-old from Argentina. Okay, we're tracking now inside the top 90. Back 9 places at 89 is Masarova. So that is a bit of a regression there. Same with Peyton Stearns, back 8 points to 87 now in the world. We've got a couple of minor progressions there. Torsen, this is one to remember. She is at 80 in the world, up 7 places. The 21-year-old from Denmark. We'll get to that later because she has been tracked so far this season and is on on the radar, let's say progressively, not in huge leaps, but she has been performing enough so far this season to really garner attention deserved. Okay, inside the top, let's say 80 towards 70, we've got some jumps, 2, 1s, etc. Yafan Wang's holding steady at 71. Inside the top 70, I think the most ranking mover we've got is 2 places. Evanescence is at 65. She's just the 21-year-old from Russia. Now we've got Martix back 3 places at 62. Schneider's at 1 at 61. Now remember, Schneider, 20 years of age, she's already got a title under her belt this season. However, so far since that title, she really has been, let's say, hovering around this ranking range and is yet to really build on that, but we'll get to that later. Kennan's at 1, so she's at 60 in the world. I think we often forget she's only 25 years of age, and we know that she has a Grand Slam to her name, although she's yet to reach the form that allowed her to not just win the Australian Open, but to make the finals of the French. And what that says essentially is that once upon a time she had all of those 7 keys, potentially 8 keys intact, and then lost focus of them. And right now, the likelihood of her having 1 or 2 of those keys into her game, it's quite probable. However, for players around this ranking range who are yet to find that form again, that they've lost grip, that level of awareness on those 5 to 6 other keys. Similar for Kvitova, she's back 1, just at 59 in the world, 34 years of age. We know she's got a number of Grand Slams to her name. However, it's similar for between Kvitova and Ken. Townsend's back 1, it's 58. However, she's had, I think, a relatively good week. Dolhide's back 8 points, so she's at 56 now in the world. Kokureto's up 1 at 54. Pliskova's back 6 at 53. Other, I think, noteworthy ones that we've got is Lynette, a very big jump, 12 places up to 48 in the world. That's an important one, and we will get to that. Same with Rus. She's up 6 points to 47 in the world. Other, I think, noteworthy ones as we're cracking inside the top 40 now. Potapova, she's back 3 to 39. Stevens has had a really good jump, 6 points to 33 in the world. She's had a very good week. Noskova, she's at 31. It says there's no progressions and or regressions here, that she is holding steady, but she was inside the top 30. So that's something to be, I think, aware of, that she hasn't been lifting her game, but she's been holding her game, which means that she's found that new baseline. And in previous episodes we've touched on that baseline, but we want to build on that from one peak performance cycle to the next. That's where obviously the periodization comes in, and that key planning, further integrating the keys into your game. So Noskova's, she's holding steady, but remember, she's only 19 years of age, but what we want to see is her building on that, and I definitely think Noskova has that capacity to crack inside the top 20, maybe this year. It's a very big maybe, but let's see how the French holds out, because she had a very healthy performance at the Australian Open. Same goes with Kalinskaya and Yastremska and Kostyuk, and we will get to Kostyuk later, but they all essentially have been building on their Australian Open performance, and Paolini is definitely the front runner from that perspective, and again we'll get to that shortly. Okay, Mertens is at 1 at 29. Bulter's holding strong at 28. Krejcikova, she's back 3 at 27. I touched on this, I think, over the last 2 to 3 weeks about Krejcikova. She's been inside the top 10. She's won the French Open previously, and she was very solid inside the top 10, but so far she has been regressing. French Open is going to be quite interesting to see that baseline, how Krejcikova has been playing, but it looks like that those keys are becoming more loose in her game, in contrast to tightening these elements to progress her back inside the top 20, closer towards the top 10. As a ranker, let's say relatively steady at 26. There we go. Kalinske is 25. She's at 1. So she's holding a bit more steady, let's say, so far this season, in contrast to regressing in, let's say, big leaps. Garcia's at 24. Navarro, she's had a little bit of a regression, so she's back 2 at 23. I think she was a few weeks ago just inside the top 20, but she's definitely a player to watch. Kostjuk, who I was just touching on, she's up 6 places, 21 in the world. So that is a very big high for her, especially after this week. So she's definitely second in the running from the Australian Open. And there is a reason why I touched on this, because the beginning of the season, we know the front runners of the season. We have very good insight. Those who are known to us, who are, say, inside the top 10, and those who are not. So we can break it down into 2 groups, if you like. And we've got players more so on the WTA Tour in contrast to the ATP Tour, for example, who are holding their own, who are creeping up so far this season, and their performances at the Australian Open have been tracking really healthy. Only a handful, but that's all it takes each and every season. So these are definitely ones to watch. Keys is strong at 20, so she's holding firm there. Svitolina's 18. Collins is firm at 15. And really interesting to see how Collins, let's say, performs this coming week, especially after her sensational 1, 2, 3 months so far this season. Paolini, she's up 1 at 13 in the world. That is not only a career high from her, she is the front runner from the pack so far this season that essentially were not ranked inside the top 30, and all of a sudden they have cracked, I guess, that threshold, and have they been able to hold their own, which is very exciting. Kazatkina, she's at 11 in the world. She is on the cusp of the top 10. I keep touching on this because Ostapenko, she was performing exceptionally well at the beginning of, I guess, this season. However, hasn't been, let's say, holding her own so far the last 1-2 months, which has allowed a bit of room to potentially a new barrier breaker to come along. Same with Jabeur, who's 9 in the world. However, when we're looking at points and rankings, she hasn't been able to hold her own. So I think the next fortnight is going to be quite interesting to see some new players potentially crack inside the top 10, which we have not seen on the WTA Tour for the best part of the last, I want to say, 2 months, despite Sakari, I think, regressing outside the top 10, then back inside the top 10, is actually very interesting to watch, especially when we're looking at ranking points and almost leveling the playing field between 11 and, I'm going to say, 9. 11, 10, 9. There's only really that 200 points-ish separating them. However, when we get to 8 in the world, which is Zheng, she's regressed back 1, so she is holding strong then at 8, but there is another 500 points then separating. So that's actually a quite substantial leap then for that next player to, I think, creep closer. But Zheng is going to have a lot of points to defend, not for some time, however, in all fairness. So we really need to see, I think, how the next 2-3 months plays out when we're looking at inside the top 8 and more, and points that are to be defended, though we do have players here who are very similar. Vondrasova, she's at 1-7. She's actually had a relatively solid week, in contrast to, let's say, the previous weeks where there was a bit of a performance plateau there. Other players we've got through 1-6, they're all holding steady. Sakari, Pegula, Rybakina, Gauff, Sabalenka, and then Swiatek. Swiatek has a very big lead in respect to points and how they're concerned, and I have to say Swiatek and Rybakina are favourites this season. Now, however, Madrid is going to be very interesting to see if Gauff and or Sabalenka, I think, are able to move closer. Same with Pegula, but time will tell. All right, that wraps up the ranking. So let's get into the tournaments that I guess have unveiled over the past week. All right, let's start in Stuttgart, where we've had the Porsche Grand Prix underway. We touched on the earlier rounds last week, so we're going to kick off from the round of 16, and we've had some really exciting matches. Starting with Sabalenka and Badosa. I don't think anyone predicted it would go to 3 sets and be tied at 3-3 in the third, and unfortunately Badosa did retire. That said, they have had, I think it was another 3-setter so far this season. I don't have those match and those statistics in front of me. But Badosa, her ranking has not been showing, I think, those key progressions because she keeps hitting, I think, let's say higher seeded players in those earlier rounds, which is not doing her any favors in respect to, I guess, getting those points that she really needs. But it's really important, and I hope Badosa hears this, that her level of play, it actually is progressing, because to be able to take the number 2 player in the world, the Australian Open Grand Slam champion, with 2 slams to her name, Sabalenka, to 3 sets and 3-all, and not to mention the first set was a tiebreaker. To me, that's actually showing Badosa's performance has been progressing. And the same goes for Raducanu with 6-2, 6-1 over Kerber. That is Raducanu's. It's up there in her, let's say, top 5 results this season. She's starting to push away. She's back inside, I think it's the top 2, no, not quite the 200, but almost top 200 now, ish. So she's been making very big inroads. I think it was around 80 points that she jumped this week from her, I think, results. Obviously, she is a very big leap away from being inside the top 100, but she's within reach to finish the season inside, I'm going to say, the top 80, potentially top 70, with some key performances. Obviously, if she makes the round of 16 or further at a Grand Slam, that ranking is going to be a lot higher. However, when I keep seeing performances of Raducanu the last few weeks making inroads like this, I would not be surprised if she makes potentially the 3rd round at the French Open. I will not go out on a limb and say round of 16, potentially not yet, but that's going to depend on the draw. But let's see how Raducanu tracks this week, potentially at Madrid. If she's playing, I'm not sure. We will get to that shortly. But this is going to be quite interesting because I know she's one to watch. She's had those surgeries. She is on her way back. Though her level of play when she was ranked inside the top 10, it was not streamlined. With obviously that Grand Slam win, there was a very big fallback. That baseline was not in line with those rankings, which is why there was a regression soon thereafter. Although this is starting to suggest, and obviously underscored by the data, that Raducanu has got 2 to 3 of those keys now into her game, and she is playing like a player at least ranked inside the top 100. We're looking for that level of consistency, and even though I've just said 70, 80 in the world potentially, if Raducanu keeps, let's say, these results up, top 50 here we come this season for sure. All right, Gauff, a very good win over Vickery, 3 sets. Potapova over Sampson over 3 sets. Kostyuk over Seidman, 3 sets. And Jabeur over Alexandrova, 3 sets, 7-6 in the third. And that's actually a very good win for Jabeur because she has not had, let's say, that many good wins under her belt so far this season. All right, round of 16 now, and Kostyuk, very good win over Zheng. Now remember, Zheng's inside the top 10, Australian Open finalist. Kostyuk, I believe it was semi-finalist of the Australian Open, quarterfinalist, semi-finalist of the Australian Open. And she has been tracking with her results, and I've just touched on she's number 21 now in the world, a very big rankings progression. This was impressive. Although I have been saying for some time now, Zheng has not been maintaining the performance and the results of a top 10 player, and why she is more susceptible to being inside that top 2% that will regress each and every season. Raducanu, a very good win over Noskova, 6-love, 7-5. Now this is impressive because I've touched on Noskova. She's around 31 now-ish in the world. Had a good performance Australian Open. She has been holding her own very steady around that ranking range. She was inside the top 30 just briefly, but she's a very solid player, only 19 years of age. We know Raducanu is only a little bit older, but she is finding that groove again. So what I'm really saying is that for her to have a win like this, 6-love, 7-5 over Noskova, this is further solidifying her capacity to progress back inside the top 10. Maybe, yes, third round of the French, potentially round of 16 at this rate, which I try to be quite careful in sharing these predictive analytics for obviously, hopefully, logical reasons. That said, I would love to see more, especially over the next 2 weeks, of this type of level of play that would suggest more, or if this is a peak performance which is going to regress soon thereafter. Players ranked outside the top 100 and essentially the top 50 as well are more susceptible, in contrast to players ranked inside the top 30, to holding that baseline and progressing on that. Right, Swiatek, good win over Mertens, 3 and 4, and again this is round of 16. Paolini over Jabeur, and this is why we're seeing Paolini now ranking high, 13 in the world. Jabeur very susceptible to regressing outside the top 10. So remember in my latest release, how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking, and I've touched on this on countless times so far this season, the 8%, the 2%. 2% of players every season will regress outside the top 10. Jabeur is susceptible, same with Zheng, and this really underscores these results. So I'm really giving you this real-time data and these rankings implications, because we've got 2 top 10 players here who are falling to players now on the cusp of potentially the top 10 and inside almost the top 20, in contrast to holding their own, that level of play consistently. And it's not just the first time. Both Zheng and Jabeur, Zheng actually has been falling more frequently, unfortunately, so far this season. That said, it was a very, let's say, meteoric rise inside the top 10 this season. Jabeur has been, however, inside the top 10 for some time now, but her performances this season has not been holding up to that level of play. Okay, Vondrousova, very good win over Potapova. We haven't seen much of Vondrousova and this level of play, but 7-6, 6-1, round of 16 was a very solid result for her, and why we've seen that one ranking progression up inside the top 10. Swiatek, we've already touched on with Mertens, 3-4. Rybakina over Kudermetova, 7-6, 1-6, 6-4. Now, this was very close for Rybakina, especially that second set, but we know the result, and this was, I think, a very tough one for her, but Rybakina is running second this season. We will get that. Kostyuk over Gauff. Now, look, 3-6, 6-4, 7-6. You can hear my excitement there. Gauff has been tracking, I want to say, good this season, in line with her ranking mostly. And I'm being very harsh here because we're looking at these key micro discrepancies, not macro, micro. So we're yet to see Gauff peak so far this season. Granted, this is the quarterfinals, and Gauff has been progressing towards around this level in most events, which really underscores, and she has been holding on to that level of play expected of a top 10, in contrast to what I shared last week, that 50% of the top 10 are not holding their own. Gauff, however, is. But this is a very good win for Kostyuk. Swiatek over Raducanu, 7-6, 6-3. This is really underscoring what I've just touched on for Raducanu. To be able to take Swiatek to a tiebreak is really, I think, amplifying Raducanu's, the work she's been putting in, and ascertaining whether it is that 2 to 3 keys, but that is really good, sets a platform for the upcoming weeks. Vondrousova, very good win over Sabalenka, 3-6, 6-3, 7-5. That was actually very sensational. Unfortunate for Sabalenka, given that she has had some earlier losses the last couple of events. That said, a very good win for Vondrousova, because these type of wins against her fellow top 10 have been lagging so far this season, so it's very good to see. Rybakina over Paolini, 6-3, 5-7, 6-3. That's actually a stellar performance from Paolini, and why she's been tracking so close towards the top 10. Very impressive. At this rate, Paolini, even though I've touched on previously Kasatkina being on the cusp of the top 10, Paolini is definitely a front runner to become a barrier breaker this season. You have heard it here, obviously right here from Beyond Top 10 Tennis, in contrast to through one of my publications, which I'm sure will come out, let's say, if not this year, next, but will underscore the data of why Paolini is on the cusp now of cracking into the top 10. These type of wins and the data that comes with that is really powerful. All right, semi-finals. Kostyuk over Vondrousova. Exceptional from Kostyuk. 7-6, 6-3. Kostyuk should be and or will be ranked inside the top 15 over the coming weeks if she maintains this level of play, and potentially will follow a similar trajectory as Paolini. Both of these players are standouts so far this season, and this was very surprising, but not so much, because Rybakina has the tools. Rybakina with a win over Swiatek, semi-finals, 6-3, 4-6, 6-3. I really want to underscore that Swiatek has been holding her own, let's say the last few months so far this season, with quarterfinals, or really round of 16 to quarterfinals results in almost every event. Rybakina hasn't played every event that Swiatek has, and her results have not been as consistent, but they are very, very close. Both with very big wins so far this season. Swiatek arguably with more higher big wins this season, and that is why I'm still putting Swiatek as one, and she definitely deserves that number 1 ranking. However, Rybakina is nudging really close to that second spot, as I think that second front runner this season, and the French is going to be very interesting to watch. And again, the finals here, we had Rybakina over Kostyuk, 2-2, showing that separation in the rankings, which should be the case, but that is this was a very interesting one to watch. All right, let's jump on over to Portugal. Kicking off from, we'll just go over the quarterfinals, and this is why, again, I touched on some key rankings earlier. Torsen over George, 1-3. Pera over George, 4-1. Penchenko fell to Mladenovic, 3-4, and Lamens over Fell, 4-1. All right, so the semi-finals, we had Lamens over Mladenovic, 4-6, 6-love, 6-love. Something definitely happened there. Not too sure what happened. We don't normally see that type of scoreline after that first set, but that was brutal. Torsen and Pera were in the other semi-final. However, Torsen did get a walkover. Pera was the number 1 seed there, so unfortunately she's withdrawn due to some reason. But how's this? The finals, Torsen, and I did touch on her rankings progression. She actually fell unexpectedly to Lamens, 6-4, 5-7, 6-4. Very close, but that is underscoring now Lamens, a title of the season. I'm going to say it's definitely her first title of this season. One to watch now, and I've touched on in these smaller events, why this is really important to see who's coming up. And one player who was already on the radar so far this season is Schneider, because she has that title under her belt, and she's around 60-ish in the world. So let's see if Lamens is able to back this up over the upcoming weeks. All right, over to, we've got Rouen in France, kicking off from the round of 16, and this was a very good event for Stevens. Round of 16, Stevens over Pliskova 3-2. Osaka fell in the round of 32 to Trevisan 4-2. Osaka's been, let's say, steady just inside the top 200 over the, let's say, the last couple of weeks since cracking inside the top 200. We haven't seen any big progressions there, which means the next few weeks is going to be quite interesting, especially the French, to see how Osaka performs. If she's able to pick up some really solid ranking points to nudge her closer towards the top 100, or if she's at somewhat of a performance plateau. All right, Gracheva over Tomova 3 sets. Ondreeva 5-4 over Evanasian. Linette over Stenovic 2-1. Schmilidova over Parry 3-6, 3-1. So Parry did have to retire from that match, even though she won that first set. Roos over Hibino 1-2. All right, round of 16, we've got Kalinina over Trevisan 2-4. Rus over Pavlyuchenkova 3 sets. Now that is why I touched on Rus in the rankings. Has been noteworthy so far this season. Pavlyuchenkova is the number 1 seed. She definitely was favourite this tournament. She's been tracking quite well this season, but her ranking is at a solid plateau in a very good way, especially leading up to the French. But this is somewhat surprising, a very good win for Rus. Yuan over Gracheva 3 sets, 7-6 in the third, and that would have been 8-6 in that tiebreak. That is a very big one. Garcia, good win over Schmilidova 1-0. And Rus over Brill 6-love 2-6, 6-3. All right, over to the quarterfinals now. Kalinina over Ondreeva 4-5. Garcia over Rus in 2. Lynette over Rus 7-6, 6-1. I will clarify, Garcia is RUSE over, and Lynette over RUS. So RUS Rus is the one we are keeping tabs on at this stage. I was mentioning Stevens over Yuan 2-2. Semi-finals, Lynette, very good win over Kalinina 4-6. And 2, Stevens over Garcia 3-2. That has to be the best win so far this season for Stevens, because 3-2 over Garcia, who was seeded second. That's a very good win. Lynette has been tracking quite well again this season, and Stevens over Lynette in the final 6-1, 2-6, 6-2, which is really good to see. And especially Stevens, I think, getting a title this season. I think it's her first in a few, I think, years, but especially I think with clay, we know Stevens can play very solid, especially at Roland Garros. All right, Madrid is underway, and we've only got, let's say, half-ish of, I think, day one. I think that will be underway today. So we're really going to touch on, I think, the qualifying rounds of what's been underway, and then we will touch on the, I think, first day of play. One to start off with for the qualifying is Torsen, who I've just touched on. She fell to Shmakova 7-6-0-0. She retired there, and I think because of that load so far in the last week. Arani over Riera 3 sets. Zazua over Parks 1-1. Sharma over Volonyet 3 sets. Seville over Zakharova 3 sets. Seville is inside the top 100 again, which is really good to see. Wickmayer fell to Berge really quickly over a couple of these. I won't go through all of them. Vickery had a good win over Masarova 3 sets. Dart over Sasnovich in 3. Other noteworthy matches we've got Timofeeva over Ferrero in 3 sets, Pera over Pigosi at 4-2, and let's finalize that with Minen over Semenasestaja in 3 sets. That is a tongue twister. As always, if I have mispronounced your name, which I'm sure I have, I really do apologize. It is by no means intentional. All right, let's have a look at the first round. We've only got a handful of matches underway, and the rest obviously will be played out later today, this evening, and then obviously tomorrow. All right, round of I think 28, very big draw this week for Madrid. Kenin Foley to Shmedalova, 3-4. So that's really underscoring why that ranking has hit a bit of a plateau there. All right, Wang over Bogdan. Now, Bogdan has been somewhat on the radar, and I would have looked at maybe Bogdan progressing to the second round here, but she fell in 3, 6-7, 7-6, 6-2. Schneiderfelter Potapova, 5-4. We've got Bagu over Frutovova, 4-6, Maria over Stern, 6-7, 6-2, 7-6, and Podoroska over Siniakova, 2-6. Last two, Serenko fell to Ayala, 3 sets, and Rus, the RUS, got a good win over Frutovitova, 7-5, 6-3. All right, that wraps up the WTA Tour. Definitely some tongue twisters in there, but we will pick up Madrid next week because there's a very big jam-packed event, a very big draw, which is really exciting. We'll have a lot of, I think, good insights, good data to draw from, and especially with the French now only a few weeks away. So let's kick on over to the ATP Tour, and we will start off with the top 100 rankings. All right, key rankings to look at as we dive into the top 100. We've got Comesana up 19 places, cracking into the top 100 at 96 in the world, 23 years of age, from Argentina. Fognini is holding strong there, 94 in the world. And we've got to remember he's 36 years of age, and we know he's been inside the top 10. Garin up 14 places, back inside the top 100 to 92 in the world. Interesting is that Garin a few seasons ago was ranked inside the top 20, had a very significant rankings regression, but he has been able to get a couple of very good wins under his belt over the last couple of weeks. Galan is up 4 places to 89 in the world. Wawrinka, he's back 1, so he's at 87 in the world. Bautista Agut's back 2 at 86 in the world. Now, both of these are 36 and 39 respectively years of age, which is really impressive. That said, Djokovic, we know, is around that age range at 36. So I think when age essentially really is a number, especially when we've got Wawrinka ahead of 21-year-olds, 19-year-olds, for example, it's really, I think, exciting and good to see. Nadi's back 3 places, 84 in the world. Nagal's back 2 at 82. Nakashima's up 6 at 81 in the world. Other places as we head towards the top 70. 75 actually, Kazuks is steady there. Menzik is 74. Now inside the top 70, we've got Evans, a very big jump back 20 places. He's now at 69 in the world. O'Connell's back 9 to 67. We've got a number of regressions around that, but Saboth Wild's up 4 to 63 in the world. Altima's up 5 to 61 in the world. Dardiri's up 4 to 60. We've got a number of ranking movements, I think, in this range. Hackman's even up 358. Murray's back 157, but he's been around that ranking range, I think, for the last couple of weeks. Vukcevic is a very big jump. He's had a really good week, up 29 to 53 in the world. Negro's 52. All right, inside the top 50, we've got Macaques holding strong at 50. Diaz Acosta's up 6, 47 in the world. Draper's up 3, 43. We've got some really good movies this week. Navone's up 11, 41 in the world. Monfils is back 3. He's at 40. All right, tracking closer towards 30 Bart. Felix Agor-Alisame is back 1 at 35. He's been hovering around just outside of the top 30 so far this season. Phils, we will get there shortly. He's up 4, 32 in the world. 19 years of age, from France. Definitely one to watch. I'll say that again. Phil's up 4 places, 32 in the world, 19 years of age. So pay attention. Nori's at 130 in the world. Mazzetti's, he's back 529 in the world. Echeverry's up 327 in the world. All right, inside the top 30, 24 in the world. Jan Leonard Strupp, he's had a good week, up 4 places. Let's remember he's 33 years of age, from Germany. But Jan Leonard Strupp, we know he's been around for some time, and it has taken a while, and that title has come. Again, we'll get to that shortly. Right, Serundo's back 122. Tiafoe's up to 21 in the world. Other places inside the top 20 are pretty solid. Shelton's back 1 at 15. Humbert's back 1 at 14, because Taylor Fritz is up to 13 in the world. He's had an unexpectedly good week, above where his level of play was over the last, I want to say, 1 to 2, 3-ish months. So he's been tracking forward again. Rouen, we touched on last week how we got bumped outside the top 10. Continues to remain the place, 12 in the world, but let's remember he's only 20 years of age, and he just needs to pick up that form a little bit over the next couple of weeks, and I'm sure we will see him back inside the top 10. Demore, he's at 11 in the world. Definitely deservingly to be able to crack back inside the top 10 without a doubt. But we've had some solid performances so far. We've got Dimitrov holding strong inside the top 10. Same with Hooksacks. Tsitsipas and Rudd, they've been trading wins over the last fortnight, which is really good to see. Rublev has not been holding up to his own, so I'm not going to be surprised if Rublev regresses outside the top 10 and Demore progresses back inside, and potentially too soon to say on Rouen, but if Fritz, I think, picks his game up, his ranking points, he's got a good 700 before he overtakes Rouen or de Minaur. So that's something maybe for the French if he really lifts his game up. But as far as points are concerned, probably not over the next couple of weeks. Though definitely Rouen and de Minaur, depending on the level of play, de Minaur is definitely favoured. That said, is really going to depend on Rublev's level of play and what he's really able to bring. Because Tsitsipas and Rudd, they have been picking up the points over the last fortnight, and I really like to see their trading places, and I really like to see that Tsitsipas was able to back his results up, because last week was really that first standout performance that got his win there at Monte Carlo. However, he really wasn't tracking forward, and that was somewhat of a surprise. But to back it up, that says something entirely different. So it's really Tsitsipas and Rudd are by all means front runners at this stage. Dimitrov Hurkacz has had successful, let's say, the last couple of weeks as well, and Sinner, Alcaraz, Medvedev, they've been quite consistent as well with that level of play. And I think Djokovic is granted, irrespective of what surface, but let's see what the next couple of weeks brings, because Sinner is edging a little bit closer to Djokovic, and potentially if Sinner walks away with Madrid, it's really going to close that gap. All right, let's get over to the events now this week. We've got Barcelona to catch up on. We'll start at the round of 16. Marizan Felter Diaz Acosta in 3 sets. Tsitsipas 7-5, 6-3 over Caballas Baena. Fils, this is what I was touching on with that rankings rise, that 19-year-old from France, got a very good win over de Minaur, a 7-5, 6-2, round of 16. But let's remember, the previous round, de Minaur had that win over Nadal, which was incredibly impressive. And I think it's fair to say potentially Nadal took a little bit out of de Minaur, and I think that's the case for anyone he comes up against, still at his current level of play. Laktovic over Davidovich, Vakina in 3 sets, Analdi over Truganelletti 3-0, Rudd over Thompson straight sets, Nori over Bautista good straight sets, and Nakashima fell to Echeverry in 3 sets. All right, quarterfinals, we had Tsitsipas over Diaz Acosta in 3. Fils did fall to Lajovic in 3 sets. Rudd over Analdi 4 and 3, and Etcheverry over Norrie 7-6, 7-6. That's actually quite interesting, that one to keep an eye on. Okay, semi-final stage, we had the surprises from Lajovic and Etcheverry, but Tsitsipas over Lajovic 5-7, 6-4, 6-2. I think that scoreline says it all, that Lajovic was meant to be there. That was a really good scoreline, and Lajovic is one to watch with that scoreline. So let's see how he tracks over the next couple of weeks. Rudd over Etcheverry, 7-6, 6-4. We know Etcheverry has been progressing in the rankings, so this isn't too surprising, but that's a very good performance to make the semi-finals of Barcelona. It's a very solid performance. We know the result. Rudd got, I guess, that win back over Tsitsipas from last week, 7-5, 6-3, which was really good to see that the two of them are, I guess, towing the line with one another. Okay, let's head over to the BMW Open in Germany, kicking off at the round of 16. Zverev here was the number 1 seed, 7-6, 6-2 over Rodyov. Garin, who I've just touched on, cracking back inside the top 100, was inside the top 20, 3 sets over Michelson. Fritz, very good win over Moro Canas, 6-3, 6-1. Draper over Mollier, 3 sets. Felix Auger-Aliassime 3-2. Struff over Van de Zandschulp 7-6, 6-4, and Whistler, the qualifier, over Halfman in straight sets. Rune over Galan straight sets. Heading back now or over to the quarterfinals, and this one is really interesting that Garin got a win 4-4 over Zverev, which really underscores, I think, his progression back inside the top 100, but also highlights that he does have that element of his game from when he was ranked inside the top 20 to deliver. Obviously, that level of consistency is not there. It's not correlating with his ranking, but Zverev's number 1 seed, top 10 player, and he has been relatively consistent, is very solid on clay, so it's actually a very good win for Garin. Fritz over Draper 3 sets, Struff over Auger-Aliassime in straight sets, Rune over Whistler 6-4, 7-6. Semi-finals, and we've got Fritz over Garin 3-4, Struff over Rune 2-0, and we know the result is, this is really surprising, and why I touched on briefly Struff's result earlier is that Struff got the win over Fritz in the final, 7-5, 6-3. Interestingly, Fritz was seeded 3 and Struff was seeded 4, so it's not too surprising that he did make the final. That said, really good for Fritz to make the finals, and it has definitely been really good for his ranking to see that progression once again that we have not seen, let's say, over the last couple of weeks. But well done to Struff to get his first title, and I think he's one of the oldest players on tour to win his first title. So that's a very big congratulations to Struff. Irrespective what age you're at, if you get your first title at 19 to 33, it does not matter. A title is a title. So that was a really exciting, I think, result over in Germany. All right, let's head over now to Bucharest, so Romania, the Tirac Open. Kicking off, we'll do from the round of 16. Navone over Surilundo, the first seed. That was in 3 sets. Barre over Martinez, 3 sets. Tabilo over Fonesca, 3 sets. And Fuchsovic over Mute in 3 sets. Semi-finals, we had Navone over Barre, straight sets. And Fuchsovic over Tablo in 4-4, so straight sets. Final, we had Fuchsovic, and this is why he's had a very big progression in his ranking, over Navone, 6-4, 7-5. And a fun fact is that in in, I guess, the semi-finals, Fucsovics took down the 4th seed to Billow, and Navone in the finals is the 5th seed. So Fucsovics by no means was favourite to win this title, and he did a hell of a job to walk away, I think, with his first title in some time now. So congratulations to Fucsovics, and really underscores that key progression there. All right, now we are over to Madrid. It's a huge event for the men's this month leading into the French Open. Singles action is yet to get underway, so we're going to quickly track on over the qualifying, because there's a number of players here which is really impressive to see. Albot over Martinez 2 and 3 in the qualifying, and Martinez was the number 1 seed. Pooley was a wild card, but he fell to Monteiro in 3 sets. Korea had a good win over Kukushkin, 3 sets. Lamb Ruiz over Hal, straight sets. Bautista Agut, 3rd seed over Omar Akinov, wildcard, straight sets. Schwartzman fell to Ramos Vinolos in 3 sets. Nakashima over Benani, 3 sets. Ugo Carabelli, straight sets over Zapata Miralaz. A very big qualifying draw. Taranto over Druget, straight sets. Klein over Martin Tifon, straight sets. Hassan over Navarra, straight sets. Mokizuki over Muller, 7-6, 2-love, so that's definitely a retirement there. Morte over Altame, straight sets. Shrelben was a wildcard over Kopriva, the 24th seed, 6-1, 1-6, 6-1. Kokonakis, a good win over Barre. Theme, a very good win over Meljeni Alvarez, 3 sets. Great to see Theme still in action. Adjikovic over Herbert, 5 and 5. Gasquet over Napiolante, 4 and 3. Medjenovic over Gaston, 3 sets. Comesia over Vasori in straight sets. Oh wow, we've got a couple more to finish off the first round of qualifying. Kokovecic over Giante, straight sets. Vako over Rodiov, the 23rd seed, 3 sets. Bagnis over Goffin was 3 sets. Great to still see Goffin still in action. We know Goffin was inside the top 10 for a number of seasons, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say at least 5 to 6 plus seasons solidly inside the top 10, and then if not inside the top 20 for even longer. Obviously has had quite a substantial rankings regression. He's at the later half of his career, I'm going to anticipate a retirement over the next couple of seasons, if not sooner, but it's really still great to see him still in action, because Goffin is one heck of a player. Okay, last match in the first round of qualifying was Zappieri over Martier. All right, second round of qualifying. These names are tongue twisters, so again, I do apologize for the mispronunciation. Bagnes over Seppieri, 4 and 4 to get his place in the first round. Kokovic over Vashero, 4 and 2. Medovic over Comisana, 4 and 1, both first round of Madrid. Gasquet is through to the first round. Straight sets over Ashkovic. Kokonakis over Theme, 6-1, 6-3, through to the first round. Morte over Shelbar, 2 and 2, through to the first round. Hassan over Moshizuki in 3 sets, and Klein over Tirante, straight sets. Nakashima over Ugo Carabelli, 7-6, 7-6. That's a brutal one. All 3 of them through to the first round. Bautista Agut fell to Ramos Vinolos in 3 sets. Lamaz Ruiz over Curia, 7-5, 7-5, and Monteiro over Albert, 7-6, 1-6, 6-4, all of them going through to the first round of Madrid, and that will get underway later today. All right, so that really wraps up what's going on the ATP Tour. A lot more, I think, ranking progressions, regressions there, in contrast to the WTA Tour this week. I think both tours take turns from that perspective, but it's really interesting to see. especially with, I think, ones to watch, newcomers, very big ranking jumps. But I think all in all, when we're looking at, I think, the results from the respective tournaments that have played out over the last week, the new ones, but also I think those who have claimed, I think, those titles, we've got 2 maiden title holders on both tours this week, which is really impressive. But look, I think at the end of the day, when we're really focusing on progressing towards that top 10 tennis ranking, you start somewhere with those titles and begin to track forward, or creating that baseline, so that level of consistency that is that one peak performance that continues to be built upon, which the 7 keys help you with. The 8 keys obviously amplifies that to track you closer towards the top 10, to allow you to become a barrier breaker. And we've also touched on players who are in line on the WTA Tour and the ATP Tour to become barrier breakers this season, when we're really getting, I think, to the nitty-gritty with the French Open just merely weeks away, on what it really takes to track towards, to develop and to achieve that top 10 tennis ranking. Thank you so much for joining us today. Oh my goodness, this week was jam-packed with results, and there was a lot of tongue twisters in there. So again, as always, I really do apologize for the mispronunciation there. I tried to, I think, speed things up by just tracking over some key, let's say, results and some implications, whilst focusing on those primary wins. And I think it was well overdue to give the qualifiers a bit of a spotlight there, because primarily we're looking at, I think, the players who are well known and that have at least 1 or more titles to their name. Primarily, obviously, we're talking about top 10 players, top 20 players, but rarely do we see those names coming through qualifying. But it's really good, I think, to be mindful of these players who are putting in that work, we know, day in, day out, but what they can do to track closer towards whether it's the top 50, top 30, top 20, and eventually the top 10. If you are one of those players, look, I really do encourage you to get your hands on the 7 keys and essentially the body of work available at AIMA International. So look to grab your copy of my new release, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking. You can find that on AIMA International or Amazon, irrespective where you are based in the world. For any comments or questions, head on over to AIMA International or Topic Thread, the social platform set on data privacy. To interact with Beyond Top 10 Tennis, head on over to Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. Catch up on our blogs, head on over to AIMA International and look for our blog tab, or head on over to Medium. And as always, I'll leave all the links in the episode notes. For something different, head on over to Pink Octopus Books, where my fictional release is. For something left of field, visit Spruik for some random polls. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, like, share, and all of the above would be absolutely phenomenal. For those of you who are interested, we do have scholarships available on AIMA International, as well as options to work with me exclusively to optimize your performance and to nudge you closer towards that top 10 tennis ranking. So don't be shy and come and say hi. On that note, thank you so much for listening. I am so incredibly grateful. I am your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.